subscribe. Subscribe to my guy, Uncle D. Tell him Big Bass sent you.
Dennis Spurling. I'm an attorney here in Houston, Texas, an advocate for black men, largely because I am a black man. I'm a black father. I have black sons. Hey, man, I do what I do.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. My name is Dennis Spurling, and I'm not here to make you comfortable. I'm here to make you honest. Everybody in this chat room has been trained to look in one direction when we talk about slavery, towards a plantation, towards America, towards whips and chains and cotton fields and tobacco plantations. And all of that is real, but it's not the whole picture. And the reason it's not the whole picture is because before a black man ever worked a field in Mississippi, before a black woman ever cooked in a big house in Alabama, someone sold them. They sold them deliberately. They sold them knowingly. They sold them after it was already illegal. And that's the part that nobody talks about. We love Africa. We romanticize it. We draped it in flags. We put the symbols on, the cloth. The fantasy was all there. We tell ourselves a story where Africa is only a victim and never a participant. And that story feels good, but it doesn't get anybody free. When my life scroll is written, it will read that Dennis Spurling isn't here to tell you comforting stories. He's here to tell you the dangerous ones, the ones that actually cost something. What he did, he's not saying that Africa is evil. I'm just keeping it real with you. And when I say real, I mean real kingdoms, real governments, real treaties, real economies, real choices, and real responsibility. And see, this isn't about blaming, it's about accounting. After 1808, slave trafficking wasn't a sign of the times. It wasn't business as usual. It was a crime. And there are ships we can name, voyages we can trace, courts that already said this was illegal. The Clotilda, the Wanderer, the Echo, the Nightingale, the Erie. These aren't myths. These are cases. See, every other reparations movement stalled because it aimed at ghosts, systems too old, laws too muddy, blame too spread out. This does not. This goes straight to the land, because that's what was really stolen. Not just our labor in America, but our inheritance in Africa. Land that no descendants return to. Minerals that no families ever claimed. Citizenship never passed down. Wealth that compounded for others while our bloodline was cut off. That land didn't vanish. Those minerals didn't evaporate. The states that replaced those kingdoms still sit on them. So the question is simple. If stolen property still exists, if the theft was illegal when it happened, and if the beneficiaries are still benefiting, why shouldn't there be a claim? Now, let me say the quiet part out loud. It takes someone like me to do this because most people are too sentimental and they're not strategic. They're too kind to be effective. They're too nostalgic to be accurate. They're too afraid of being called names to demand what's owed. See, you don't survive South Central Los Angeles in the 80s and 90s by believing in myths. You survive by learning who's responsible, who's lying, and who profits. That environment doesn't raise dreamers. It raises analysts. That's why this couldn't come from a think tank. It couldn't come from a Pan-Africanist or an activist. It couldn't come from people who need consensus to move. It had to come from someone trained to look at power without flinching. This isn't betrayal of Africa. It's respect for truth. If a state benefited from stolen land, then justice doesn't care what color the rulers are. And if that makes someone feel uncomfortable, good. Freedom has never come from comfort. This isn't about hatred, it's about recovery. It's not about vengeance. It's not about symbolism. It's not about apologies. It's about recovery of land, access, rights, position, and continuity. That's how nations are rebuilt. That's how lineages are restored. That's how history actually gets corrected. Everything else is just mourning. And today, I hope that the rest of my people are done mourning. Now, we're going to talk about an important part of history today that most people are never taught. It's the story of how Africans were still being brought into the United States illegally after 1808, even though the law clearly banned it and the world had begun to condemn the slave trade. See, in 1808, using the powers given by the U.S. Constitution, Congress passed a law that made it illegal to bring enslaved Africans into the United States. 12 years later, in 1820, Congress made another law even stronger. It declared that the slave trade was piracy, one of the most serious crimes under international law, punishable by death. And so by the mid-1800s, slavery and the slave trade were also widely seen as violation of international law and would today be considered crimes against humanity. Even so, the slave trade didn't actually stop in 1808. Instead, it continued secretly for decades. Slave traders used hidden voyages, illegal landings, smuggling networks. Many of these operations were funded by Americans and supplied by African governments and kingdoms. And while the U.S. Navy did stop some ships and federal courts did condemn certain voyages, most of the people who organized and profited from these illegal crimes were never seriously punished. In my research, I found documented proof of illegal slave trading voyages that happened after 1808. And this evidence comes from court records, Navy reports, congressional documents, historical sources from the time. We know the names of the ships, where they left from, where they were captured, and what the courts decided, and what happened to the Africans on board. And see, this work is not guesswork or storytelling. It's based on real records and facts. These Africans were not just numbers in a history book. They were real people who were illegally taken from their land, their families, their political rights, and their ability to pass property down to their children. Some of their descendants formed real communities in the United States, such as Africatown in Alabama. Others were spread across the country, but their descendants can still be traced using history and family records. This research and these lawsuits, they serve several purposes. Correcting history by showing that the slave trade did not truly end in 1808. Number two, proving legally or proving the legality by showing the U.S. courts at the time officially ruled these voyages illegal. And number 3, measuring impact by estimating how many Africans were illegally brought to the U.S. and how many descendants exist today. And the other thing it does, it provides a legal foundation for discussing responsibility, fair law enforcement, and long-term harm. And by bringing all this information together, the goal is to make sure that the future discussions, whether in schools or courts or public debate, are based on documented facts and established law, not myths or opinions. What I'm doing in simple terms, and I want to be clear what this project is and what it is not. I'm not trying to sue over slavery in general. I'm building a series of federal lawsuits based on specific crimes that happened after January 1st, 1808, when bringing enslaved Africans into the United States became illegal. By 1820, the law went even further and officially labeled the slave trade as piracy, punishable by death. And even after that, you still had African kingdoms who continued to sell Africans, knowing that the trade was illegal, knowing that the buyers were breaking U.S. law. And several of these illegal voyages were stopped by the U.S. Navy, investigated by federal courts, and ruled illegal at the time. And so these lawsuits are filed and based on real cases. What we're not arguing about is general terms. Okay? We're dealing with specific ships, specific voyages, and court cases where American judges have already ruled that the crimes had taken place. That is the legal foundation of this project. Now, there's been a lot of back and forth, and people have a lot to say about a lot. And obviously, they know very little about it. This subject generally, because it's not discussed or spoken about. But I want to let you all hear what the people are saying. Now, I have one rule here. You don't owe me a dime. What do I mean by that? Unless you learn something, there's no need for me to earn something because I need to do my job better. But if you learn something today, I should earn something. If you learn something, I should earn something. That being the case, I want everybody in the chat room to hit the like button. Go ahead and hit the like button now. Subscribe if you have not subscribed. This is going to be an ongoing series. We are getting hot. The lawsuits are prepared. I will be flying to different locations around the country to meet with the descendants of the different African people who were captured and brought to this country illegally. I will be going to Alabama, South Carolina, Georgia. I'm not asking you all for anything but except to listen, so you can be educated on this subject, so you don't sound like an ignorant fool when the question comes up and we discuss reparations. Shout out to Generation Malcolm X. Thank you so much. If you learn something, I should earn something. I need everybody in the chat room to subscribe to the channel right now. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel right now. We have 97,000 people watching according to my 1,000 people watching according to YouTube page here. According to my 1,000 people watching according to YouTube page here. According to my 1,000 people watching according to we're serious people. You all YouTube page here. According to my 1,000 people watching according to YouTube page here. According to my 1,000 people watching according to YouTube page here.
according to my channel,
let's go ahead and proceed. And I want to,
according to my
first of all, let's go ahead and proceed. And I want to,
according to my
first of all, let's go ahead. Okay.
Let it go.
First of all, let's go ahead. Young woman
She don't want it. She don't have
this video. This is an issue that happened in not to create animosity, not to create misunderstanding. Made bail that initially weren't allowed to bail. My understanding is. But I bring that up because the foundation of Black Americans, the American media, another word, freedom, because Black Americans, African Americans, another word, we have this misbelief, Black Americans, that our African brothers love us as much as we love. Another word, we have this misbelief, what I am pointing out that our African brothers, you don't know about now. You should have figured out that largely they see us as a that's fine. They don't get large.
Show the money. Show me that pay.
Brotherhood, and that misplaced. In my opinion. All right. Now I use that just as a starting point. Now I'm going to address some of the issues that I see coming from a lot of brothers and sisters. So we talk about some of the issues that I see coming from a lot of brothers and sisters. Black people.
Is that Africans and African Americans see each other through the lens of white supremacy?
When we deal with each other, we talk about how Africans sold other Africans into slavery. When we deal with a lot of people say, oh no, we talk about how Africans sold other Africans into slavery.
The video is perfectly explained. I encourage you all to go look at it, but I want to add another thing. We talk about the narrative that us African Americans are taught that Africans sold other Africans. Before I get started, yes, that statement is correct. People in Africa did sell other people that were in Africa. Context is never added to this narrative. When you make that statement, you're assuming racial affinity and Pan-Africanism. And these things just simply didn't exist yet. An African didn't look at another African and think, we're both black, we're just fine. If they were part of a different tribe, they felt no communal responsibility to this. It's like you're assuming that black people should have been united. We're both black, we're just fine. If they were part of a different tribe, they felt no communal responsibility to this. It's like you're assuming that black people should have been united. We're both black, we're just fine. If they were part of a different tribe, they felt no communal responsibility. It's like you're assuming that black people should have been united. We're both black, we're just fine. If they were part of a different tribe, they felt no communal responsibility. It's like you're assuming that black people should have been united. We're both black, we're just fine. If they were part of a different tribe, they felt no communal responsibility.
Show you all. That should have fixed it. That should have fixed it. Go ahead and keep listening.
Before the concept of being black was even introduced to them. This happens again and again in our education system. It's like when we showed individualism, y'all come in and communally oppress us on the basis of race. But then when we create a community based on race, you say, why don't you just be yourself? Why do you make everything about race? We did that back in Africa. Y'all came in, exploited that, and then separated us from our culture. One of the many things that
So, here's the thing. I find it interesting that a lot of black people from Africa or a lot of Africans will say, well, we didn't sell our own people into slavery because you weren't our brothers and sisters.
Slaves were treated more like me.
Keep listening. Here's another one. These are these arguments, right? So I'm going to say this now. Pick a side. See, when the lawsuits start, don't say, oh, we are brothers and sisters. How can you sue me? If now you're saying, well, we sold you into slavery because you wasn't our brothers and sisters. But now, miraculously, since we're about to hit you with this $1 trillion lawsuit, now we're brothers and sisters. You shouldn't do that. Think about that.
Housekeepers are treated today than slaves were treated during chattel slavery. I'm so sick of white people acting like they know stuff when they really don't know anything.
No, baby girl, you don't know. okay, because there were literally treaties that existed between Portugal and the kingdom in the Congo, Alfonso I, which literally gave them permission to come down and capture Africans and sell them. So, anyway.
White people keep saying that I should be upset with my ancestors for selling black people into slavery. Sure, Africans did sell Africans into slavery,
and that is not something that we can just brush off. There's a debt that is owed.
There's some nuance there that no one likes to talk about. The biggest one being that African slavery, not talking about Arabs was different, but traditional African slavery was more like indentured servitude.
So you're saying traditional African slavery, well, they weren't selling them, and they knew they were selling them to people who weren't African. They knew they were selling them to Europeans. They knew they were selling them to Arab slave traders. Did you assume that those people thought, oh no, they'll treat them the same as we do? Do you think Africans were that stupid? Do you think that Mansa Musa, the richest man in the world, as early as the early 14th century, who had traveled from Mali all the way to his Hajj in Mecca, didn't understand how Africans were treated in other countries? See, again, this is the romanticization of Africa that I have a problem with, which has gotten in the way of the reparations movement for literally half a century. Okay, this is the problem. Okay, and this is what we have to deal with now. Let's listen to this African brother who's
lecture right now. So I thought I'd drop some knowledge on y'all. Today's topic is slavery.
Now, this is an African brother with the hood on and whatnot, and he's going to talk to us about slavery. Let's listen to the brother.
Wait, don't laugh. This is not funny. So I see a lot of people talk about, oh, Africans sold their own people to the white people in slavery and all that. And while that is true, we got to give a lot of context to this.
Okay, so he's about to say, well, no, we weren't the same people. We were different people. Okay, and so because we were different people, right, doesn't matter. We were just selling enemy tribes. Okay, well, hold on and keep that same energy. I want you to stay on that side of the fact that we were different people. You stay there. Don't come back
to this thing, right? So in Africa in the early days, you feel me? There was a lot of war and rivalry going on and all that shit.
Manufactured war solely for the purpose of ginning up reasons to go capture your neighbors and sell them into slavery. Let's continue.
So what would happen is every time a tribe or anything like that would go to war with another one and they won, they would take those people as captives. And what they would do is they'll trade those captives for goods and needs and all the stuff that they needed.
They needed? So Africans that existed in the African continent for thousands of years, and white folks who just came out of the dark ages, they had what they needed to survive, or did they just want what was available? Maybe that's what was it. See, let's not try to humanize this horrible business by saying Africans were only trading other Africans into slavery because they needed things. They would trade them for rum. They would trade them for guns. They would trade them for tobacco. They would trade them for little or nothing. And now it's time to take a hard look at what actually was done. We've heard this argument dozens and dozens of times, and this has been the argument that has largely convinced most Black Americans to steer away from actually holding Africans or the African nations accountable for their role in the slave trade. Now, I find this interesting. This young woman says, white people tell us to go back to Africa, right? They tell us to go back to Africa, and then, we go back to Africa, and guess who's in Africa? Guess who's in Africa? This is Africa. This looks no different than Fisherman Wharf somewhere in Coney Island. Filled up with white people. The only people that seem not to go back to Africa are Black people.
So thank you.
Just look at this. So, that being the case, I want to go ahead and get this thing going because we have a really hard-hitting broadcast, and I want to make sure that we get everything there. Now, I'm going to start with the fact that, well, let me say this. Make sure if you haven't subscribed to the channel, we have 223,000 people in the chat room. And I want to make sure you subscribe to the channel now. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel now. If you have not, please subscribe to the channel at this time. Now, there's a famous incident. Okay, and what are we talking about here? We're talking about reparations, and I'm going to go into some detail. I'm not going to lose you all. I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible. Shout out to Timothy Bright. Thank you so much. I will read all the comments at the point where we've concluded, and I may open the chat room up and let some folks in. Thank you so much. I may open the chat room up, depending on how fast I can get through with this. I may open the chat room up and let some people in. Be more than happy to hear from critics and people who are interested. Now, I want to talk about the Clotilda, spelled Clotilda, and this is the most well-known, one of the most recent uncovered crimes. This case, the Clotilda was a ship in 1860. It carried 110 African men, women, and children illegally from the Kingdom of Dahomey. That is the modern day Republic of Benin. Dahomey, it wasn't a passive participant. They came up with this movie several years ago called The Woman King, which showed you that these are warlike people who were fighting with neighbors, and they were fighting over slaves. Slavery had become the economy of Africa. It was the business model that you wanted to get into. There are stories and documented incidences where you had Africans who were sold into slavery, returned to Africa, and became slavers themselves. Nevertheless, as I said, the Kingdom of Dahomey was not a passive participant. It was a centralized military state, and their economy depended on slave trading and slave sales. And the captives sold to the Clotilda were taken from the Dahomey-controlled port of Kedah, okay, and the surrounding territory. And by the time the Clotilda sailed, the trade had been illegal under U.S. law for over 50 years. When the ship arrived, it came into Mobile, Alabama secretly. The traffickers burned and sank the ship to try to hide it. The Africans were enslaved until Civil War. And after the emancipation, the survivors founded a town called Africa Town. It still exists. There was a famous documentary about a gentleman named Cudjo Lewis, C-U-D-J-O, Cudjo Lewis. And this brother was one of the people on the slave ship. And the town still exists. And see, the case of the Clotilda, you had two white men. They were prosecuted. One of them's name was Timothy Mayer. The other one, he owned the Clotilda, and the captain, William Foster, who sailed it. And the case was filed as the United States versus Burns Maher and Timothy Maher and John Dabney in 1861. Now, unfortunately, the charges were dismissed due to lack of evidence because they burned the ship, so no one was convicted. And there were no serious criminal convictions, but the illegality of the voyage had never been disputed. And this case is especially strong because the descendant community is living and identifiable and traceable to that single illegal act. By my estimation, there's approximately 100 descendants still living in that particular location in Alabama. Now, 2 years after that, or 2 years before that, there was a ship called the Wanderer. And it was a similar crime. The Wanderer carried 400 Africans. They were taken directly from the West and Central African coast, including regions tied to Dahomey and Congo, okay? Which today would correspond with Benin and the Republic of Congo. And unlike the Clotilda, the Wanderer, it didn't dock openly. The Africans were secretly landed along the Georgia, South Carolina coast near what is called Jekyll Island. And then they were smuggled inland and sold into slavery. Now, the federal authorities seized the ship and prosecutions followed. So these are two cases where they have two criminal prosecutions. The juries, they wouldn't convict these white men. They wouldn't convict them of trafficking. And that had a lot to do with the politics of the time. We're talking about pre-Civil War. But the federal government did formally acknowledge the voyage was illegal, and they end up seizing the ship. So the criminality of the act itself was never in doubt. And these facts make the Wanderer a joint source case involving multiple African successors. Now, I'm going to put some cases in the chat room for my smart people, and you guys can go ahead and check that out. You can find those cases online, and you can read all about them. Another situation, the same year, 1958, the United States Navy intercepted one of the most horrifying voyages ever recorded, the Echo. The Echo left the Congo, Angola coast, and it took captives. It took Black Africans from the Kingdom of Congo, Ndongo, which is the predecessors of the Republic of Angola, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Approximately 450 Africans were loaded into a ship. And by the time Echo was captured, 140 had already died from starvation, disease, and abuse. These are our people. Okay? The federal government filed a lawsuit. The surviving Africans ended up in Charleston, South Carolina before they were repatriated to Sierra Leone. But that also gives rise to another lawsuit. There's another case, the Erie. There's another ship in 1860. They took this is what makes this interesting is this is Nigeria. Okay, the Erie departed from the Lower Congo and the West Central African region, again implicated in the Congo Basin as one of the trading states, and this is the Democratic Republic of Congo and parts of Nigeria's coastal trading network. The ship that caught them, the U.S. Navy ship that caught them, was the USS Mohican, and it was condemned as an illegal slave trader. They took it and confiscated. Another one was the Nightingale. The Nightingale was another ship. It came in 1861. This was particularly horrifying because 960 Africans, 960 poor Africans were snatched up and put on these ships at the Bight of Benin in the Nigerian coast. And it was, at the time, it was controlled by the Oyo Empire, the Yoruba, the Igbo, right there in the Niger Delta. This is currently the property of the Federal Republic of Nigeria right now. The ship was seized off the African coast, but the USS Saratoga, before it could land in the United States, this case ended up getting tried in federal admiralty court in New York, and they condemned the voyage. So there's case law, okay? And see, these cases reveal a clear pattern. After 1808, even after the trade was branded piracy, you had very specific African nations who still continue to supply human beings into the legal market. The ships are known, the dates are known, the sources of where they came from are known, and the U.S. Navy interdicted. And the U.S. courts turned around and condemned them. So the end goal of these lawsuits is this. Well, let me explain this. This is not a moral argument about slavery in general. It's a legal argument about stolen African land, destroyed inheritance, and successor state enrichment. The end goal of these lawsuits is not simply money, although monetary settlements are possible. See, the deeper objective is leverage. Somebody type leverage in the chat room. Somebody type leverage in the chat room. The deeper objective is leverage. Leverage to negotiate land access and long-term leases in our ancestral regions, citizenship, or protected status in successor African states. You see, royalty, equity participation in mineral extraction, and restitution trusts that operate independently of U.S. taxpayers. See, I'm not looking for retribution or redistribution. I'm looking for repatriation and restitution, recovering land, resources, and legal standing that were severed by crimes that were already illegal when they were committed. See, this is what my project is about. And as I stated above, I'm building a series of test case federal lawsuits in U.S. courts against successor African states whose predecessor kingdoms knowingly participated in the illegal transatlantic slave trade after 1808, when the United States had already outlawed the importation of enslaved Africans. Okay? Now I'm gonna run this back to you all again, because we have some people who are difficult to deal with. How do you sue a country that wasn't around that back then? Successor state liability. Okay? Well, who's gonna sue who? The descendants are still there. The people are still there. Now I'm gonna take the time to show you all some of these lawsuits while I continue to speak on this subject. I'm gonna share the screen. I'm working on organizing some meetings around the country. I can bring this up to you all so you can kind of get a look at how this works. I hope that there's nobody in the chat room that says something as silly as, how do you sue a country that wasn't there, that's still there? All right? So this is just a working lawsuit. Okay? This one is the United States District Court for the Southern District of Alabama, Southern Division, Mobile. It lets you know the lawsuit will be filed in Mobile, Alabama. This happens to be against the Republic of Benin as a successor state of the Kingdom of Dahomey. Now, what I do here is I go through the language and I break down specifically what happened. The introduction, this case arises from one of the last known acts of illegal transatlantic slave trade to the United States in 1860, trafficking more than 100 Africans aboard the ship Clotilda to Mobile, Alabama. Plaintiffs are living lineal descendants of those Africans who were unlawfully seized, sold, and deported from territory then controlled by the Kingdom of Dahomey, the predecessor sovereign of the Republic of Benin. Okay, this action seeks property-based restitution, not moral redress. We don't care if you're sorry. Plaintiffs do not seek reparations for slavery in abstract. They seek compensation for identifiable land, mineral, and intergenerational economic property loss as a direct result of Dahomey's state-organized slave trafficking. You see? Plaintiffs acknowledge the presumptive immunity of foreign states under the Foreign Sovereign Immunities, that's called FISA, and plead with particularity the statutory exceptions that apply. Plaintiffs further plead that the conduct at issue constitutes a violation of just cogence, norms, etc. I go into the jurisdiction of this and why the court has subject matter jurisdiction. The parties would go there. These are the direct descent. They'd be named specifically, list the factual allegations, why it was illegal at the time. I denote the Clotilda voyage here and where the African descendants are, and they are in the jurisdiction of this. The property taken, the land, occupancy rights, agricultural yield, minerals, estates beneath such land, inheritance rights transmitted across generations. And then I explain what successor state enrichment is. Okay, defendant Republic of Benin retains sovereignty over the lands from which plaintiff's ancestors were taken. Defendant benefits from land and mineral exploitation, heritage tourism tied to slave trade sites, commercial solicitation of diaspora engagement based on that history. Defendant has never provided restitution or compensation to Clotilda descendants. Okay, what are the causes of action? They're listed out. Expropriation and violation of international law, unjust enrichment, restitution, conversion and interference with inheritance rights, violations of law of nations, and we look for declaratory relief. Shout out to Timothy Bright. Here's a prayer for relief. Here's another one. United States District Court, Southern District of Georgia. Are you learning something? Thank you, Timothy Bright. Savannah Division. This is a lawsuit against the Republic of Benin and Republic of Congo on behalf of the actions arising from the illegal importations of hundreds of Africans into the United States in 1858 aboard the slave ship Wanderer 50 years after the United. Now, I want you all to keep in mind that there are already cases, criminal cases or admiralty cases in the courtroom from 1860, 1865, 1867, which tried the captains of those ships and the other people who participated for the criminal acts where the ships were taken, were seized. Now, it's just a really simple matter of getting the judge to take judicial notice of what the court has already done, that very same court. Here's another lawsuit. The Republic lawsuit, the United States District Court for the Southern District of South Carolina, Charleston Division. Lawsuit against the Republic of Angola for what happened for the 450 men and women and children who were illegally transported on the Echo in 1858. Same general, they were intercepted by the United States Navy. So all of this is well documented. Okay, not only are there legal cases that were tried to conviction, but you have the records. Here's another one. In the United States with the District Court for the Southern District of New York, New York Division. This is a lawsuit against what is called the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Shout out to Red Sigma. And this is for the illegal trafficking of nearly 100 African men, women, and children aboard a ship called the Nightingale in the Erie. You see? Right? Jurisdiction is proper, New York. This is where the admiralty case took place. We're suing for land, mineral rights, property. Okay, you see the difference? And I'll show you this one and we'll move on. It's another lawsuit against the Democratic Republic of Congo, Southern District of South Carolina, for their actions related to the slave ship Echo in Erie in 1850. Same stuff. Okay? Same stuff. We are suing for tangible items, land, access to land. Mineral rights. Y'all with me? Are we learning something? All the critics, please save your criticisms for the end. I think I will let some folk in. Now, here's what we need to understand. Why land matters more than anything in 2025. What I'm articulating here is not nostalgia, family. It's not symbolism, and it's certainly not romantic Pan-Africanism. It's hard strategic. It's a hard response to material conditions in 2025. And it rests on the truth that law, history, and economics will all agree with. Land is wealth. Labor without land is dependency. In 2025, money without land is transient. It's going to disappear from your hand. Land is durable. Land is jurisdiction. Land is sovereignty. Foundational Black Americans, American Negroes, freedmen have always understood this intuitively. From Reconstruction forward, every serious advance towards independence was tied to land ownership, farming communities, towns, business institutions. Every time we acquired land at scale, it was taken from us. What we built was destroyed or undermined through violence, law, policy. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was not wrong when he said we needed land. He was not wrong when he said we needed to separate ourselves from certain folk. The problem was where and how. In the United States, even when Black people acquired land, Nothing stopped those white mobs. Not the banks, not the courts, not the legislators. Those white vigilantes, what did they do? Huh? What did they do? Here's a video from a television show. Look at this. Look at that. This is what they did. This is a video of a television show where they talk about what happened in Tulsa. So what happens if we get all this land? What's to stop the redneck brigade from invading us on the 4th of July? You understand? I mean, we've done this before. We've always had success. The bombings, the fire bombings. And this happened thousands of times around many different towns, whether we're talking about Elaine, Arkansas, Rosewood, Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's what they did. So, again, I think the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, even Marcus Garvey, to a certain extent, they were right. We do need our own land. We do need to separate ourselves because we're not safe. We're a tiny minority in the country surrounded by people who don't like us. Wilmington, Delaware, Elaine, and dozens of others. This country has never provided lasting security for Black land holding at scale. And today's conditions don't suggest that that has fundamentally changed. And what has changed is the form of threat. This is not the era of the Ku Klux Klan riding openly through town. This is a subtler, more total form of pressure: housing displacement, credit access denial, environmental exposure. Shout out to Timothy Bright. Policing, political marginalization, and now technological and economic destabilization. Different means, same outcome. And that is why land matters now more than ever. Why is this about Africa specifically? Well, this legal strategy is not about labor performed in America. Now, that's a morally powerful issue. But it's stalled for decades because it's asked the wrong defendant and relies on time periods when slavery was illegal. Their response is, well, you didn't do the labor. Everybody who did the labor is gone. Isn't that what they tell you when you say Black people deserve reparations? They tell you, well, you didn't do the labor. You weren't a slave. You didn't work for free. So why should you be compensated for the labor that somebody else did? And so that's why we're talking about stolen African land and resources, because that land is still there, and the people who stole it from us, who sanctioned us being sold, those governments, their successors are still there. Because see, before our ancestors ever worked one day on an American plantation, they were removed from African land, from their villages, from their inherited plots, from their political membership, from their mineral-bearing territories, from their intergenerational continuity. When Africans were illegally trafficked after 1808, after the trade was outlawed, entire tracts of land were emptied. Those lands didn't vanish. They remained under the control of the successor states. The minerals beneath them, oil, gold, diamonds, cobalt, are still being extracted today. And that is a property claim. That's restitution law. That is legally cognizable harm, and it belongs in court. Now look here. Suing Africa is not betrayal, it's accuracy. See, many people, and I see you all out there struggling right now. You're struggling emotionally. You're struggling emotionally with the idea of suing African successor states. That discomfort is understandable, but it's misplaced. Because see, look here, historically, reality matters more than your feelings. African kingdoms and and politics were not passive bystanders in the post-1808 illegal slave trade. Many of them knowingly continued to capture and sell people after the trade was criminalized, profiting from land clearance and human export. And that fact has been documented by historians for decades. Law does not require unanimity of morality. It requires truth and evidence. This project, it doesn't indict Africa as a people. It names specific successor states tied to specific voyages already adjudicated as illegal by the US courts at the time. The truth is not anti-African. The truth is not anti-anything. The truth is the foundation of repair. Now, we need somewhere to go. I'm talking to my foundational Black American brothers and sisters, whether you still call yourself African American, Black American. Some of you all might be still colored on your birth certificates, depending on when you were born. Some of us, you remember the term American Negro. Some of us can go way back and remember colored and freedmen. But what you need to understand is that there are 45 million Black people in the United States today. Approximately 25% already have somewhere to go because they're first and second generation African immigrants or they're Caribbean immigrants, and they still have existing national homes and families. They even have dual citizenships by birth or descent. We as Black Americans don't have that. We're the only Black population in America without that. We don't have a nation to return to. We don't have guaranteed external citizenship or a territorial fallback option. And as American politics become more and more polarized and more racialized, okay, these racial tensions have become more explicit. This is not an abstract concern. Every serious people plans for an exit option, okay? And let's tell the truth plainly. There are too many of us to go anywhere else except Africa. You're not going to put 37 million Black Americans on an island or into someone else's country. It is physically impossible. I've been to Jamaica. There's just not enough room. So the only livable landmass large enough to receive us is Africa. The one place in the world where we were violently removed from. That land is not foreign to us. It is withheld from us. And what we're demanding is not permission, not processing, not delay, not proof of how much money you have in your bank account. What we want is the immediate right of return. And see, the thing about litigation, it creates leverage for us to do that. We're going to sue you for land access. Well, we're going to sue you for this money, and we'll get land access, citizenship rights, long-term leases, mineral or royalty participation. That's not escapism. It's risk management for a population with no sovereign refuge. And look, Africa is the future. And that's why timing matters. This might not have been a good idea 100 years ago, during the time of Marcus Garvey. But see, at this particular point in history, economic forecasts consistently project that Africa will be the most important global region by the mid-century. By 2060, the continent of Africa is expected to be central to mineral supply chains, energy transitions, population growth, emerging markets. And Black Americans are uniquely positioned. We lost Africa through crime, not migration. And that fact matters legally and morally. This is not charity. This is not welfare. This is reconnection to foreclosed opportunity. the core distinction here. See, labor can be exploited anywhere, but land anchors you somewhere. And see, this strategy recognizes that wealth flows from land outward, not the other way around. Money without land evaporates. Land creates leverage across generations. That is why this case matters now. This is why Africa matters. And that this is why this is not a fantasy, but a strategy, a legal strategy. And it's necessary. You see? Again, and I want to be very specific. We're focused on the period after 1808, when the United States made it illegal to import enslaved Africans. There was an act, it was literally called the Act Prohibiting the Importation of Slaves. It became effective in 1808. And by 1820, as I said earlier, they made it even harsher, death penalty. But despite that, you still had illegal slave ships that still operated well into the 1850s and 60s. And many of these cases produced federal cases and court records. Again, let me run this back to you. The Clotilda in 1860. We talked about it before. I'm going to talk about it again. The illegal voyage from Dahomey, which is modern day Benin, to Mobile, Alabama. Shout out to Timothy Bright. That is a direct trip. And it's the basis of the lawsuit that I have put together against the country of Benin. The Wanderer in 1858, the illegal landing of hundreds of Africans on the Georgia coast. The basis for the suit against Benin and the Republic of Congo. The Echo, 1858, 450 Africans, extreme mortality, intercepted near Cuba, processed through Charleston, South Carolina. It's the basis against Angola and the DRC. The Erie, 1860, illegal ship sourced from west to central African coast, seized by the USS Mohican. It had ties to Nigeria and the DRC. Same thing with the Nightingale, 1861, 960 of our ancestors. One of the largest illegal cargoes seized before the U.S. landfall. It's the basis of the lawsuit against Nigeria. And here's the thing, in each of these, there are U.S. court decisions condemning the vessel and the federal prosecution under the anti-slave trade law. So we're not guessing, family. We're not standing, we're standing on an existing record that already called these acts illegal. And legally, the main tools we're using are FISA, which is the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, and its expropriation exception. We're using the commercial activity exception, okay? We're using the alien tort statute for violations of the law of nations, slavery, forced deportation, crimes against humanity. And we'll plead alternatively some common law theories like unjust enrichment, conversion, interference with inheritance. And so we're arguing that these African state predecessors took property in violation of international law. And when they captured and sold and exported our ancestors, and that modern state still profits right now from the land and minerals that we were removed from. Right? Who's not following this? Is everybody following this? If you're not following this, let me know. But for you all who are following, we're going to move on. Now, what about the numbers? How much, what are we talking about here? We're not talking about a symbolic case with a handful of people. The scale is real. Our preliminary modeling suggests that there are roughly 800,000 potential claimants who can in principle trace lineage to Africans trafficked illegally after 1808. That's 800,000 people. 800,000 foundational Black American people. And I have a working figure, and based on lost land use, mineral value, intergenerational compounding, each one of these direct descendants claim is worth about $2 million. $2 million. And that's conservative. Because you need to consider, when you consider that what a family could have accumulated over 6 or more generations sitting on oil, diamonds, gold, cobalt, and fertile land. There was about roughly 15,000 Africans taken between 1808 and 1861. And those descendants that were brought directly to the United States. And they have about 800,000 potential claimants. So when you really add that up, that's about 800,000 times $2 million a piece. That's $1.6 trillion in total exposure that those 5 African nations that I intend to file these lawsuits against are looking at. $1.6 trillion. That's conservative. I'm not talking about labor. I'm not talking about anything else but land, mineral rights, etc. Now, let's be honest. We know that most courts are unlikely to issue a judgment for $1.6 trillion. It'll get appealed. It'll be appealed for 10 or 15 years. But even if the case settles or resolves at 10 to 25% of the model value, you're still looking at hundreds of billions of dollars. You're looking at land grants. You're looking at citizenship. You're looking at co-sovereignty arrangements. You're looking at resource concessions, mineral royalties. You're looking at educational investment funds. Those are real numbers. That can change the material conditions of Black people in the United States. Now, the question you should be asking yourself is, who qualifies? Because, see, there's a lot of noise because a lot of people are reacting emotionally to the numbers like, that's not enough or that's too much. And you don't even understand the basic fact. This program is not for everyone. Out of the 45 million Black people in the United States, only about 800,000 people qualify for these claims. I have purposely made eligibility narrow by design. You're going to have to be able to trace your lineage to a specific African ancestor who was illegally trafficked after 1808 on a documented voyage or through a linked smuggling network. If you can't do that, you're not a claimant. That means all the Black people loudly announcing, I'm not going back to Africa, are largely irrelevant to this conversation. No one is asking you to go back. If you don't qualify, then this is not your claim. It's not your lawsuit, and it's not your decision. You can stay right here where you are. What it also means is that all you folk out here who are from the Caribbean who say that Black people don't deserve reparations, and all you Africans who say that Black people don't deserve reparations, all you people who identify as indigenous to America or claiming to be a Native American, anything you say is unrelated to this post. Africans don't qualify. Caribbeans don't qualify. See, this framework is evidentiary, not ideological. You either descend from a documented illegally trafficked event or you don't. There's no opting in, there's no mass inclusion, there's no political expansion or eligibility. This is precisely why this model avoids the dilution that destroyed previous reparations efforts. You talk about reparations in California, now you got Mexicans talking about they want reparations. You got Africans who say, well, we were victims of, we had to deal with racism in America for the past 25 years. So they want reparations. There's no line jumping. There's no symbolic affiliation. No broad racial categorization. No space for outsiders, black or white, to try to hijack this claim. So when critics say, why don't you sue the United States instead? Isn't that what you say? The answer is simple. You're free to do that. You are free to sue the United States. These 800,000 people are free to do it also. In addition to this strategy, exercising one legal option does not cancel another. If you all manage to sue the federal government, this is not going to get in the way of that. See, federal law doesn't require ideological uniformity. See, what is not acceptable is people with no legal stake, no qualifying ancestry, and no standing attempting to veto a claim that does not belong to them. This is no different than immigrant groups complaining about Black Americans' claims for reparation arising from injuries that predate their arrival. You were not harmed by this conduct. You did not lose your land. You don't inherit this claim. You have no dog in this hunt. Again, let me be clear about the scale. Even though the total model exposure approaches $1.6 trillion, no one is pretending the courts are going to just write a check. What matters is leverage, 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 leverage. Because see, the leverage scales even when recovery doesn't. If these cases resolve at 10 to 25% of the model value, that's not symbolic. That is justice, but it's also structural change. It's land access. It's citizenship pathways. You don't have to wait that long line to become a citizen of Nigeria, Togo, Benin, or Congo. You don't have to wait to become a citizen before you can own land. It's yours. And this is what matters. And this is why it's happening now. And this is why opinions from people with no standing are beside the point. This is not a vote. It's a legal claim. And the people who qualify will decide how they want to use it. Now, let me get another clarification together. Most people don't qualify. Okay? You don't. See, returns and reparation and repatriation and restitution, they're not a reward system for identity alone just because you're Black. You get to go back. This requires discipline. It requires intent. It requires capacity and clarity. Africa is not a fantasy destination. It's not a protest slogan or a place to escape personal dysfunction. African nations and the people in these African countries, they already are facing serious economic and political and social challenges. The last thing they need is somebody who has entitled access, but is coming over there unprepared, unresponsible, and without purpose. So what this does is naturally create a separation process. For those who can trace their lineage, for those who meet the evidentiary standards and demonstrate seriousness about contributing to long-term national building, they have options. And those who can't, you can't meet the standard, or you don't want to, you're going to remain exactly where you are, and that's your choice. See, many of the loudest critics are not actually opposed to Africa. They're opposed to leaving the comfort zone. They talk about that return to the motherland. They talk about Pan-Africanism. They talk about solidarity, but they never take the steps to require sacrifice. The rhetoric is easy. Movement is not. And history shows us the separation isn't often general. It's often a generational. You understand? Even biblical narratives. When you look at the Bible, you can't drag everybody forward simultaneously. It happens when those prepared to move do so and take responsibility for what comes next. I'm not trying to force anybody to go anywhere. It's about restoring options that were violently and forcefully taken away from us as a people. This thing makes people uncomfortable. But see, your discomfort is not a legal argument. See, this is not a popularity contest. It's not a mass migration plan. And it certainly is not a group therapy session. It is a legal claim, narrow, documented, and deliberate, asserted by people with standing readiness to resolve this. Now, I fully expect that when we file these lawsuits, these defendant nations are going to file motions to dismiss. They're going to come up with plenty of sovereignty arguments. There's going to be a lot of conservative judicial hesitation. But the question we need to ask ourselves is, why is it that the federal judiciary has never seen anything like this come from Black America? Why hadn't somebody filed this suit before? Not in 160 years. And this is the first time a Black American, especially a trial lawyer, not an activist, is putting African successor states in the defendant's chair for the role in the illegal post-1808 trafficking of our ancestors. Part of the reason courts have never confronted this is because the reparations space has historically been dominated by activists, academics, cultural theorists, and Pan-African idealists, not litigators. Not people trained to weaponize evidence, commercial liability, and international law. See, these previous efforts operated from a place of compassion towards African states and emotional solidarity with the continent. You know, that ain't me. None of that is legally effective. Compassion doesn't substitute for a cause of action, and romanticizing doesn't produce jurisdiction. That's where I differ. I'm not approaching this as a dream or as a symbolic moral crusader. I'm approaching this as a battle-tested trial lawyer who understands that liability must be tied to facts. Responsibility must be attached to identifiable sovereign actors. And these lawsuits are not simply about compassion, they're about leverage. They're structured to force the U.S. courts to acknowledge successor state liability where the underlying acts were already criminal at the time. We want to build judicial recognition that these harms were property-based, not merely labor-based, and create a negotiating, pressure to negotiate outcomes that money alone can't buy. Land access, dual citizenship, or special status, mineral royalty rights, long-term economic inclusion in regions our ancestors were stolen from. So yes, we're going to deal with some early losses, but early losses are part of the larger strategy. No major restorative justice litigation, whether we're talking about Native American land cases, Holocaust cases, Japanese internment cases, none of them ever succeeded on the first round. You change the law by forcing courts to confront what they have tried to ignore. And that's the point of these lawsuits, not just to win damages, but to shift the legal foundation beneath the entire global conversation about African descended people, land, and restitution. That's what we're doing. And that's why it's never been done before. Because see, even losing strategically does the following. It creates a formal record. It ties specific descendants to specific ships and specific African states. It forces acknowledgement that African states, not just European powers, profited from illegal trafficking of slaves after 1808. And more importantly, it establishes a legal precedent and a narrative that this is a property expropriation problem, not some amorphous grievance. That the harms are quantifiable and legally cognizable. We know exactly how much this land costs. And it creates leverage. We want land, we want citizen rights, we want mineral royalties and mineral rights. And it's legally sound. We're not inventing new law. We're applying existing FSIA exceptions. We got the names of the criminal cases. We have admiralty condemnation. We got criminal prosecutions. We know it was illegal. See, my shot at reparations is not about slave labor in America. That's the key difference. See, most of these reparations efforts, they've gone nowhere for decades. Tell the truth. You guys have been talking about reparations since I was a little boy. See, this is about stolen African land, resources, inheritance taken through illegal international trafficking. After 1808, when the United States had already outlawed the slave trade, and that distinction isn't academic, it's foundational. See, most of these reparations movements try to focus on slavery in the United States. Even if you did get land within the United States, let's say you did get this massive judgment and the United States awarded you half of Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Alabama. What's to stop the redneck raiders from invading you on Independence Day? What's to stop them from doing the same thing they did in Tulsa, Oklahoma? You'll never have peace. And you don't have a military. And there'll be so many strings attached to it. Guess what? You won't even be able to enjoy it in peace. And if you get money, you're just going to put it back into the economy. Land, on the other hand, something different. And so if your legal argument at the U.S. government, meaning, understand that, who's going to pay for that? It's coming from the American taxpayers. That includes Black Americans. That includes us. And here's another uncomfortable fact. Much of slavery in American history, especially early on, it was legal at the time. And what that does is it gives courts an easy way out. We recognize the wrong, slavery was bad, but there's no enforceable legal claim because it was lawful at the time. And see, this project takes an entirely different route. You understand? Instead of framing the harm as unpaid labor in America, this strategy focuses on prior, more concrete injury. And that is the permanent removal of Africans from our homelands, resulting in the loss of land, mineral estates, political membership, and intergenerational inheritance in Africa itself. And all of that happened before one slave, one African was taken and landed in America. See, look, when you talk about we want reparations for slavery, what do they tell you? They say slavery existed everywhere, didn't they? The Irish would come in here and tell you they were slaves. The Slavs would say they were the first slaves. And although that is morally evasive, it is legally effective, especially when discussing periods where slavery was legal. Did you know slavery is still going on in Africa right now? It's still going on in Africa. The Africans still haven't learned their lesson. They are still to this day, they got slaves. I think they have a video. They still haven't learned their lesson. Selling each other out. So you go to an American court and say, well, yeah, slavery was bad and you all participated in slavery. The Africans are a necessary party because they still have slavery going on right now. Why didn't you bring them in the case? Oh, case dismissed. We're not trying to litigate slavery as a global human condition. We're litigating specific violations of specific anti-slavery laws committed after the trade had already been outlawed in 1808. We have the names of the ships, the voyages, the known African capture points, the U.S. naval interdictions, and we have the descendants. So this isn't some generic history. It's a criminal conduct already recognized as illegal by the United States government and the time it occurred. And what this does is it stops the people from jumping in and doing everything they did before. Look, man, 800,000 people. That's a lot of people. $2 million a piece, $1.6 trillion. That's a lot of leverage. The ultimate goal of this lawsuit is land access, citizenship, equity participation, royalty rights, everything you would get from land. You understand? And what do I need you all to do? First of all, I need you to hit that like button if you haven't already. Hit the like button if you hadn't hit the like button. Hit the like button if you had not hit the like button. If you hadn't hit the like button now. What do I need you all to do? I need you all to help our people understand this is a lineage-based, evidence-driven legal project, not an online hashtag campaign. We're talking about people who can actually prove that they descended from documented illegal slave shipments after 1808. If we do this right, we create a new legal lane for Black Americans, American Negroes, FBAs, freedmen, and our descendants with provable lineage. We create a template that can be scaled. We set a precedent that our grandkids and great-grandkids can build from. I'm not just swinging at the fences. The history is tight, the law is plausible, and the numbers are big enough to matter. Now, how does this fit in the broader reparations movements? How does it fit? First, you need to understand that any case law generated from these actions will help, not hurt, the broader reparations movement. Okay? Anything. See, right now, that movement is stagnant. Not because the moral case is weak, but because the legal architecture hadn't moved in decades. You still trying to do the same thing over and over again, and you're failing. Courts haven't been given a narrowable, winnable framework that they can actually work with. These cases that I'm going to put forth can help change that, because they actually produce judicial opinions on slavery-related expropriation, successor state responsibility, and in restitution remedies tied to historical crimes. All of that advances the legal conversation for everybody. And just as important, these claims, we're not going to override anybody else's claims. They don't compete. We sidestep them. We're not asking the court to resolve slavery in general. The only question that we're asking the court is, what happens when a foreign state, after slavery was already illegal, participated in criminal acts that permanently stripped people of land and inheritance and still benefit from it today? That is a different claim with a different evidence burden and different remedies. Again, I know a lot of you all are struggling with the idea of suing African nations. They're innocent, right? That's what you want to say. There's a long-standing narrative that Africa was simply innocent. They didn't know what they were doing. After 5 centuries, they didn't know what they were doing, and it's still legal now. You still got Africans selling other Africans into slavery right now. You don't think they know what they're doing? Look, the historical record doesn't support your feelings. A lot of African states participated in slavery post 1808 when it became illegal. They knew it was illegal, and they did it anyway. And this has been known and documented for years. You had the British patrol all up and down the West African coast saying, don't do it, it's illegal, don't, and they did it anyway. Look, acknowledging the fact that African nations were guilty, it doesn't negate European or American culpability. It simply tells the whole truth. Not the half truth, not part of the truth, the whole truth. Law is not therapy, it's accountability. And the useful thing about the legal system is you don't need a committee or a consensus or universal emotional comfort to proceed. You need willing attorneys, and I'm here. You need real clients. I'm gonna meet with them. You need evidence. We have that. And a courthouse. We got plenty of them. That's it. The United States court system exists precisely to handle claims people are uncomfortable with, especially when they're grounded in fact and law. And this approach allows progress where decades of moral argument alone have stalled. And once you've had a chance to digest this, I'd like to sit down with you all and we can talk about it, maybe in an open forum. We're going to use the test case of the Clotilda, the Wanderer, the Echo, the Erie, and the Nightingale. And we're going to bring lawsuits against Benin, Angola, Nigeria, and DRC, and the Congo. Is that clear? Now, that being the case, I got a closing statement for you all, but I want to make sure you learn something. If you learned something, hit the number 1 button. Let's get my man Generation Malcolm X. Thank you so much. Been waiting on it. Appreciate you, bro. Thank you so much. Black and Red. We got 12 super chats. Let's see if we can get 15 in the chat room. Who else we got? Bad Equity. Thank you. I sorted that out earlier. Salute Audio Overlap. Thank you so much. I need to let the audio go bad again so we can get some more people in here to contribute to the super chats. Let me see. Timothy Bright 7064. Can the U.S. tax our reparations? We should leave. We get reparations. The U.S. wants resource tax. Well, you know, again, if you listen to the actual conversation that I put forward, we're talking about land and citizenship in those respective countries. I heard you can't read a true Quran in English, only Islam. Thank you so much. Timothy Bright, I just wanted to say thank you, Deacon Spurling. Thank you so much. Red Sigma, 99,000 viewers, 89,000 subs. Get 100 calls. Yeah, we would like to do that. All lawyers know this. Dennis is the only one to act. Yeah, that's right. The woman just died from Tulsa at 111 years old. Yeah. Timothy Bright, thank you so much. So go through the ancestry and where to trace your lines. Thank you so much, Red Signal. We got 13 super chats. I appreciate it. Look, let me go ahead and get this close. Shout out to everybody. Let me see if we got super chats in here or cash apps. Shout out to everybody who contributed to the super chat, the cash app, and the PayPal. I'm all business today. We got to do this thing in 30 minutes. Look, man, shout out to everybody on the rebroadcast. And shout out to Good. Did you learn something? I always appreciate the knowledge. Did you learn something? Did you learn something, family? Because see, that's what I need to know. Somebody is going to pick this idea. I'm going to tell you right now. Let me tell you something. With this type of money available, there's going to be some white folk at some white colleges who are in law school, at some white, they'll pick this case up. And it'll be after white people pick this case up, that's when black people will jump, you'll join the board then. Because see, unfortunately, and I want all the white folk to listen to me, unfortunately, because I am a black American, and as brilliant as this legal strategy is, black folk will not join on to this. If I was a white man, blonde-haired, blue-eyed white man telling you this, even if I was totally unqualified, y'all would be chomping at the bit. You'd be saying stuff like, "Oh, this is a great idea, but he's gonna steal our money." ... XYZ. That's what you would do. Because in your mind, like Brother Malcolm said, the white man's ice is still cold, and it's unfortunate. Just like now, the primary distributors of Brother Kevin Samuel's talking points are white folk. They got panels set up and so on and so forth. You didn't appreciate him. And now his information is basically permeated the whole world. So this information, this brilliant information that I'm giving you, this strategy to kill two birds with one stone, get you out of this racial cauldron of America, cut through the red tape, get you citizenship in Africa, along with a steady source of income in the form of mineral wealth, land, et cetera, is unbelievable to you because it's coming from a black man, and that's unfortunate. You see, this is going to make a lot of white law firms rich. They're going to file the same lawsuits that I have on this thumbnail in those jurisdictions. It's going to get sent to an MDL, 8 or 9 years. They'll be walking away with $3 or $4 billion in attorney's fees. And you'll be like, man, I remember when Dennis Spurling came up with that idea 15 years ago. Why didn't we act on it? You see, and that's unfortunate. But that's just how my people are. But that's not my job. My job is just to put the information out there. Amen. That's my job, just to put the information out there. I've done my job now. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Some of you all are wondering, where did I get this? Where did this idea come from? How someone arrives at the point of suing African nations after coming from a generation where we idolize Africa and romanticize. Where did we get that from? Now, I'm going to be honest with you. The truth is going to sound absurd. But nonetheless, I'm going to tell you. Where was the impetus for this idea? Where the impetus? Not necessarily the strategy or the research, but where did the notion come from? Well, number one, I'm a lifelong student of history and law, but I'm also a dad. And in 2018, when my oldest son was about 11 and my middle son was about 8, I found myself sitting in a movie theater watching a movie called Black Panther. Not because I grew up on them. I was just with my sons and they wanted to see Black Panther, and I thought it was a cool idea. That was the year the movie came out, 2018. And since that time period, I've watched that movie no fewer than 6 times. And initially, as is now, I keyed in on a very peculiar character. And he forced to confront me, just like many of you all, something that most of us have avoided in life. And that character I'm referring to in the movie is played by Michael B. Jordan. They call him Eric Killmonger. And again, he wasn't wrong. He was angry. He was reckless in his execution. But when you strip away the theatrics and the emotion, his core premise was undeniable. Africa has a debt to its children in the diaspora. Not an emotional debt, not a symbolic debt, a tangible material debt. And not to everyone who claims African ancestry in the abstract, but to a very specific group, my people. Foundational Black Americans, the American Negro, freedmen, descendants of Africans who were forcibly removed, sold after the trade was already illegal, and permanently severed from land, citizenship, and inheritance and continuity. That realization it unsettled me. And because I'm a lawyer and not an activist, I didn't sit with a feeling. I had to process that. How do we do that? So I began to research, and I learned about the part that Africans played, whether we're talking about the King of the Congo. I interrogated the information. I tested it against history and law. And it was after that moment that I began seriously studying the reparations theory, not slogans, not marches, not moral appeals, but what had actually worked anywhere in the world. And around the same time period, I already began broadcasting publicly in 2020, asking hard questions that made people uncomfortable, and I wasn't doing it from a desk. See, I spent years walking through the slave quarters in Jamaica, in the Dominican Republic, in Trinidad, and Galveston, Texas, and New Orleans, Louisiana, examining records, standing on the same soil where my ancestors passed through. They have a cafe called Cafe du Monde in the French Quarter. And if you stand at that cafe on that street, you can see where they would sell our slave ancestors on the auction block. See, my people don't need more speeches. My people don't need another promise from America. My people need justice. Not the sentimental kind. They need the legal kind. And that's where the work comes from. Not fantasy, not bitterness, not anger alone, but sober recognition that if we are ever going to secure land, safety, and continuity for our descendants, it will not come from pretending everyone is innocent. It will not come from waiting to be recognized. It will come from confronting responsibility, whether it actually lies in having the courage to do what no one else has been willing to do. And some of you are wondering if I'm really saying that Africa owes a debt to people like me. And the truth is, yes. And I know I'm not the only one that understands what I've said here today. Now, I might be the only one willing to say it loud and publicly, and then have the money and the experience and the knowledge to go through with it in the courtroom. And see, the difference is not intelligence. You all are smart enough to understand what I'm saying. But I will say the difference is background. And my background is not dissimilar from a lot of you others. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles in the 1980s and 90s during the height of black-on-black gang violence and mass incarceration and crack and police occupation. I didn't grow up with a luxury of romanticism. Where I come from, death wasn't theoretical, it was routine. I've seen people unalived over nothing. I've seen whole lives erased without ceremony, without justice, and without apology. You learn very quickly in that environment that sentiment does not protect you and symbolism does not save you. That upbringing burns something permanent into my thinking. Systems don't respond to emotion, they respond to pressure. And history doesn't correct itself just because people suffer. Someone somewhere has to force the issue. And that's why I don't view Africa, and I don't review this through some fantasy lens. Whether it's the fantasy of America finally growing a conscience or the fantasy of Africa as a blameless motherland untouched by power, trade, and accountability. I'm not operating in mythology. I'm operating in record books, court rulings, ship manifests, and federal interdiction cases. And I can separate love from leverage. I can honor our African history without protecting African states from responsibility. And I can acknowledge that my ancestors were brutalized by white supremacy without pretending that certain African kingdoms were active participants in the illegal slave trade after the law had already changed. And that mindset doesn't come from bitterness, it comes from reality. See, people raised with softer borders between ideology and survival want unity first and healing first and comfort first. I understand why. But where I come from, if you wait for everybody to feel good about the plan, nothing ever gets done. Bodies pile up while committees debate. That's why this approach had to come from somebody like me, a Black American raised in violence, trained in law, hardened by loss, and disciplined enough to put a strategy over sentiment. Someone willing to be called controversial, divisive, even traitorous, a bully, all those things you all are saying about me. I love it. If it's the price of movement, I love every bit of it. I'm not doing this because I hate Africans or because I hate Africa. I love my African brothers and sisters. But what I am doing is, I'm doing this because I refuse to lie to myself or to my people about how power actually works. I'm doing it now because time is up. America is changing, for lack of a better word. The world is shifting. The ground is moving beneath all of us. And foundational Black Americans, the American Negro, Black Americans, we have no country, no fallback homeland, no inherited land based that we can go to. We can't keep pretending that these moral arguments alone are going to save us. This is about securing options, real ones, land, citizenship, resource rights, without all that red tape. A future that doesn't depend on begging permission from a declining empire. Family, I didn't come to this idea from anger. I came to it because I survived long enough to see that survival without strategy is just another slow death. And my people deserve better than that. To my Black American brothers and sisters, here in 2025, I want you to understand something. You finally stop begging the table for scraps. You start asking who owns the land the table is built on. See, that was the mistake that everybody else who came before us was making. For decades, they've been screaming about pain and dignity and labor and feelings, trying to guilt America into caring about them. And that was never the move. America doesn't pay for guilt. America pays when property rights, sovereignty, and exposure are at stake. What I've done here for you is to shift the entire battlefield. We're not asking permission. You're not asking for forgiveness. You're not pleading morality. You brought receipts. You're not suing the United States like a child asking an abusive parent to admit wrongdoing. You sidestepped that trap completely. You went upstream to where the bodies were taken from and asked the question nobody wanted to answer. Who emptied the land and who still profits from the vacancy? That's dangerous. in a good way. Because once you frame it like this, the story changes. Now it's not America exploited black labor. It's entire African territories were stripped of people, inheritance, mineral rights, political continuity after slavery had already became illegal. And those successor states still benefit today. That's not history. That's quiet wealth transfer with a dirty title. And I respect that you all sat with me and understand where I'm coming from. See, this is narrow. This is not for everybody. This isn't vibes. It's all about descendants. You see, this is not all descendants. This is named ships, known voyages, court cases that have already been ruled on declaring what happened at this particular incident was illegal. And the specific descendants, the 800,000, somebody type 800,000 that can prove lineage. So there's no room for line jumpers. There's no room for $5 Indians and imposters, and there's no room for dilution. That's how real power moves, quietly, surgically, legally. And yeah, some people are gonna get in their feelings about suing African nations. They want heroes, they want innocence, they want fairy tales. But see, power doesn't run on comfort. It runs on truth and leverage. Those kingdoms sold our people after they knew better. Their successor states inherited the land without heirs. Their economies grew on absence. You're not attacking Africa. You're closing an open ledger. And the part they don't understand yet, even if you lose at the district court level, we still win. Because every page we file forces the world to admit this wasn't just America, this wasn't just labor, and this wasn't just some ancient wrongdoing. It was illegal, it was documented, and it's unfinished. We're building something more dangerous than a protest. We're building land claims, citizenship leverage, mineral equity rights, and precedent that outlives any one of these lawsuits and probably us. That's not revenge, family, that's strategy. Just remember this. We're not going to dilute it. We're not going to soften it. And we're not going to let them turn this into symbolism, because power doesn't apologize, power reclaims. This is Uncle D. I love you all. God bless y'all. I appreciate everybody. And I'm out.
Dennis Spurling Podcast. Hit the like button, subscribe.